This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer, come in, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Permix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den.
And welcome into episode number 68 here on the Huskies Warming House podcast, bright and early here on this Saturday morning here, Nick. I don't know why we always do this, but somehow we end up back around the 7:30, time. But nonetheless, we're happy to be here. We're happy to bring you our last NCHC preview of a team that is not our St. Cloud State Huskies. The Duluth Bulldogs are on the docket today. We're going to talk a little bit about them. Some pretty interesting transactional news in the NHL in our Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup. And we're going to finish off the day talking about some St. Cloud State women's hockey. Their full schedule now is released, and we're going to see what they have coming up in their lineup this year. You won't want to miss it here, but we'll start with Center Ice View news and notes and the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup.
Center Ice View news and notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
Starting things off, Noah, in the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup, the Stanley Cup playoffs are now 3-0 in favor of the Tampa Bay Lightning. But more important news in the Granite City started off in local St. Cloud State news. Recently graduated Huskies women's defenseman Hannah Bates was selected in the 4th round by the Connecticut Whale this past week. The 22-year-old Trenton, Michigan native was often known for her physical and intelligent defensive play, and was taken 20th overall in this year's draft. She earned 2 goals and 15 assists for 17 points in the back end in her 4-year collegiate career. The current women's team is set to get back in action in October against Lindenwood at home before jumping into the WCHA play the next week against Wisconsin. The news comes as the Huskies learned their full schedule just a couple of days ago. Again, we will discuss and break that down for you in the Extra Ice session with the addition of 6 non-conference games with the culmination of the full WCHA schedule lineup.
Moving over to the NHL, they released the latest individual NHL awards this past week. And of course, a familiar Minnesota Wild forward, he made the cut. Rookie sensation Kirill Kaprizov took home the Calder as the top NHL rookie with 27 goals to go along with 51 points in 55 games played this year, scoring at a blistering 40-goal pace if the season had been played in full. Connor McDavid also became the second player in the 97-year history of the Hart Trophy Award to win by unanimous decision in his award there. The only other player to do so was also an Edmonton Oiler when Wayne Gretzky put up 212 points in a season in the early 1980s. McDavid also took home the Ted Lindsay Award for most outstanding player as voted on by his peers. New York Rangers D-man Adam Fox took home the Norris as the best defenseman in only his second NHL season, tallying 47 points in 55 games played with 42 assists this season. The NHL general managers also selected another award, Vegas's Marc-Andre Fleury, as the winner of the Vezina Trophy as the league's top goaltender.
Let's go back to the Minnesota Wild, shall we, Noah Grant, because Joel Eriksson Ek and the Minnesota Wild have come to an 8-year, $42 million contract deal after a career 30 points, including 19 goals. So congratulations to Joel Eriksson Ek and the Minnesota Wild getting the deal done. Going up to Edmonton, again, they've been in the news recently. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins got also an 8-year deal worth up to $41 million in Alberta. Remember, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins was rumored to be on the trade block. He will be staying up in Alberta. Toronto re-upped Wayne Simmons to a 2-year deal, and 35-year Carl Soderberg has left Colorado to play in his native Sweden after 17 points this past season. 2 head coaching spots also in the NHL have been filled. Buffalo has removed the interim tag for Don Granado, who will now become the new full-time coach there for the Buffalo Sabres. The next 3 years now for Arizona, they have now named Andre Tourigny as the new bench boss in the desert. Granado was the interim coach after Ralph Kruger was fired earlier season back up in Buffalo, and Tourigny will replace Rick Tocchet after winning gold at this year's World Juniors over there in Europe. Lastly, the Los Angeles Kings nabbed forward Victor Arvidsson from Nashville in a trade for a 2021 second-round pick and a 2022 third-round pick in the next 2 drafts. A former U.S. Olympian Chris Chelios will join Mark Messier, as well as the ESPN broadcasting lineup was also released just a few days ago. Arvidsson is coming off a 25.50 game season, which makes him $4.25 million for the next 3 years after his trade to Los Angeles.
That's about the same amount of money that I'm going to make this upcoming year, right, Nick? $4.25 million annually. Our final topic does start off with a bit of sad news. Boston Bruins superstar David Pasternak's newborn son has died this past week. Vigo Roll Pasternak passed away 6 days after his birth. And of course, we at the Huskies Warming House podcast, obviously wishing David, Rebecca, and their families the best during this difficult time. In scheduling news, the Minnesota Wild and St. Louis Blues outdoor game that was slated for last year at Target Field is back on for January 1st of 2022. Nashville and Tampa will also play outdoors this upcoming season at Nissan Stadium, home of the Tennessee Titans, and Vegas will host next year's All-Star Game. Finally, next summer, we'll see the Montreal Canadiens host the 2022 NHL Draft at the Bell Center.
And Noah, just to clarify too, for those wondering what that outdoor game is, yes, that is the Winter Classic that was supposed to take place this past year, rescheduled again for this upcoming January.
And once again, welcome into episode number 68. I almost said 38. It's definitely early. It's 7:38 in the morning, though, Nick. Welcome again, my co-host, Nick Maxon. Of course, I'm Noah Grant. Nick, how are you doing this morning on this Saturday? A little bit of a different time change for us as we get ready to rock and roll for the upcoming week here with some interesting stuff we got going on.
Well, I think first of all, that the big thing that we're doing here is we're trying to just try to give ourselves a little bit of a full day. I know with the 4th of July, we both have some stuff planned with each of our families. So trying to be able to enjoy the full day. And we still can't miss an episode here, Noah. So to all the fans out there, recording early. And again, even today, I think we're both working today. So this is the time that we decided we would get this done. But other than that, besides being a little bit tired, getting excited to celebrate the upcoming holiday and a couple of extra days off, at least from work for me, there will be plenty of other things I'll be doing in preparation for a couple of things next week. But overall, pretty good. And for those hockey fans on Monday is going to be game 4 of the Stanley Cup final, and Lord Stanley will be in the Bell Center. We'll see if Tampa Bay can wrap it up. It's not looking good there for Le Habitant.
I would say, if Montreal is going to lose in this Stanley Cup final, which percentage-wise seems fairly likely, I'd like to see them at least, I guess, get to Game 5. It would be kind of cool to see Tampa win at home. It's been a long time since we've seen that Stanley Cup winner win at home, if I'm not mistaken. It seems like teams usually just kind of get it done on the road, which I don't know if it's easier to get it done on the road, but nonetheless, it's not an easy task at all. Well, Tampa Bay has a chance to go back-to-back here.
They do, back-to-back. And I think, honestly, I think we all just don't want to see a sweep, in the Stanley Cup final. This is where it's supposed to be close. It's supposed to be hard fought. It's supposed to be back and forth. Again, Montreal, you could call them the Cinderella story of the Stanley Cup final this year. Maybe some questions whether they really deserve to be here. Well, guess what? They've earned it with the teams that they beat. Tampa's just a different animal. Tampa is built to win cups right now. And as you mentioned, and again, in the Stanley Cup final, as much as I think Tampa would love to win a cup in front of their fans, I think they also would just like to get it done, whether that's on the road or wherever else. So just trying to get it accomplished is number one for them, and have a pretty good chance for that on Monday.
Yeah, Game 1 I don't think it was a 5-1 game. It was more like a 3-1 game. Tampa, kind of the recipient of some fortunate bounces, playing the right way. Game 2 was Montreal's to lose. And unfortunately, as we talked about with Ben Holden, if you didn't get a chance to check out that interview the other night, you definitely are going to want to do that. But that goal for Blake Coleman, was kind of a backbreaker with a couple seconds remaining in the second period when Montreal was all over Tampa Bay up to that point. And then yesterday, it just seemed like the Lightning carried all that momentum into a pretty quiet, Bell Center with the only 3,500 fans that were allowed in the building. So, it was no secret that between games 2 and 3, Montreal had to have one of them. The uphill climb is real. The only team to actually come back from a 3-0 deficit in the Stanley Cup Final, 1967, Toronto Maple Leafs against the Detroit Red Wings. So it's only happened once in the final, and I believe only 7 or 8 times in history total for a team to be able to come back from 3-0 down. In fact, I'm more than curious, who is the last team to get swept in the Stanley Cup Final as well. It's got to be the early 2000s, if not the late 1990s, because I don't remember, any series from 2004 onward that did. 2003 was Anaheim, so it had to have been the 90s, probably Detroit, maybe in 97 or something like that. So
possibly that sounds about right. I'll have to do some digging into the archives on that one, but it doesn't happen often. And again, I think as hockey fans, that's actually something we don't want to see here in the Cup Final. You want to see, 2 evenly matched teams, and unfortunately, Tampa is unfortunately exploiting and probably going to be ruining the Cinderella story there for the Habs. So, but at the end of the day, again, you still got to go out and win a hockey game on Monday, so nothing's ever guaranteed. Noah, you and I both know that. But the way that Tampa has been playing, the way that they're coached, I think they'll be ready to go, and I think they'll be. I think they are destined to have a good chance of hoisting the cup as early as Monday.
Right. It's actually, interestingly enough, we were kind of right on the money, Nick. 1998 Detroit Red Wings over the Washington Capitals. How about this? From 1995 to 1998, the New Jersey Devils over the Red Wings, Colorado over Florida, Detroit over Philly, and Detroit again over Washington. All those series, they went 4 straight years in which the Stanley Cup Final was a 4-0 finish. Ugh, that's boring.
That's not what do you call it? That's not the kind of hockey you want to see at that level. And I think, obviously the league has changed quite a bit since the 90s. I think there's a lot more skill that's spread out throughout the league. So I think that kind of prevents some of those, Oilers dynasties, even I would even say some of those Red Wing dynasties we saw in the early 2000s. So, but again, this year a little bit different, not really skill-based, just more of, I think, you could argue whether Montreal, as I mentioned, should be there, but guess what? They beat the teams to get there, and I think unfortunately, their story to be where they're at will probably be coming to a screeching halt.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, but like you said, Game 4 on Monday as well, and Tampa Bay looking to be only the second team in this millennium to be able to go back to back in the Stanley Cup Final as champions. The other being the Pittsburgh Penguins. 2016 and 2017. Speaking of champions and repeat champions, Nick, what a great transition time to talk about the Duluth Bulldogs. Normally we have a trivia question this week. We won't have it until next week just because of the fact that we're recording here early on this Saturday morning. When we're talking about the Bulldogs, of course, back-to-back champions, they were searching for their 3rd championship, making it to the Frozen Four, falling in overtime at the hands of the eventual UMass Minutemen in that first game of the Frozen Four. 15-11-2 was their record this season, 18.8% in the power play. Kind of an abysmal penalty kill by Duluth Bulldog standards at 75.5% last year, plus 18 in the goal differential category, 3 goals, 4 per game. 2.4 goals against, and a plus 151 shot differential. That one kind of surprised me a little bit. Not that Duluth isn't a good hockey team, but they weren't a team that struck me as a group that, kind of had their foot on the gas pedal and was that dominant, but they find a way to win. That's just Duluth Bulldogs hockey, and the underlying statistics don't lie. They finished 3rd of the NCHC with 43 points, 2 points behind St. Cloud State, 3 points ahead of Omaha. A couple more quick stats before I get your thoughts here, Nick. On the season for the Bulldogs last year, only 46.7% in the faceoff dot last season for the Bulldogs. That's an interesting stat for a team that, a lot of teams that don't have good face-off numbers, it kind of trends that they don't have success because they don't have the puck. So interesting to note that. And St. Cloud was one of only 2 NCHC teams to score 4 goals 2 separate times against Duluth. Question mark, who do you think the other team was to do so this year? Any idea?
Not a clue.
Western Michigan 3 times this past year. So talk about the season that the Broncos had there. But Duluth, obviously the matchup that St. Cloud State has at the end of every season. Coming up this season, they're going to have Duluth up at Amsoil again to finish out the regular season. What did you notice from this Bulldogs team that I believe it was 7 or 8 times they met the Huskies last year? We got to know them quite well with 4 overtime games, if I'm not mistaken. So it was one heck of a battle.
It really was. With the Bulldogs, the one thing that I guess was kind of goofy, at least for me, was, they were a very streaky team this year. Mm-hmm. And it was, first of all, they had a really good start to the pod. I think they came out of the pod, second or third in the nation. They came up hot. And then they started to kind of go up and down. A split against Denver, and then a split against North Dakota. They lose 2, I guess you could say, loss and tie with Western Michigan. Win-loss with Minnesota State and Clarkson, and then St. Cloud. They do sweep Miami. They take 1 from Omaha as a makeup game. They lose to them again at home. They split against CC. They split against Denver. So there just wasn't really a consistent winning streak in the regular season. But as we all know, Noah, and we've talked about this before, is that this Bulldogs team, you can't really look at their regular season and you can't really project them based off of that, because they always turn it on when they need to. And again, in the playoffs, again, reaching the national semifinal, again, UMass, again, taking down the Bulldogs there, and holy buckets, man. It looked like to me in that game, watching inside the arena there in Pittsburgh, and they just were on gas. But as you mentioned, the faceoffs, I actually took a look back their past 2 seasons, and their faceoff percentage was about 54% last year, and then about 53% 2 years ago. So it is a big drop for them. I did notice that the faceoff dot wasn't quite as successful. And then, as you mentioned, the penalty kill, which is usually one of their staples there for Scott Sandlin, as he preaches defensive coverage, was not as great. So it's interesting how just 2 areas of the game, if they falter even a little bit, it can sometimes impact your overall team's ability, especially down the road. But still a really good season for the Bulldogs. And again, looking to see how they retool for this upcoming season in more of a normal schedule versus last year.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, and this is not to discredit Duluth. I know that they didn't have that first round matchup against Michigan, but more than made up for it the following game against North Dakota with that 5 overtime winner. With Zach Stayskal and Ryan Fanti, it was, and this is not to discredit them, they both played great, down the stretch, but during the season, I mean, they aren't Hunter Shepard, right? So when you look at those penalty kill numbers, when you look at the face-off dot percentage, it's interesting to see that Duluth, was still able to stay in that top echelon. They do lose, I believe it's 4 players. They're going to lose 3 forwards and a defenseman, 252 combined points in that matchup, and they're bringing 1 transfer in. But before we get to that, when you talk about that tournament record and how good Duluth has been, I think where we've got to start is head coach Scott Sandlin entering his 21st season, 406 regular season wins for him, a .545 winning percentage. But how about this? 22-7 in NCAA tournaments for a .759 winning percentage, 5 NCAA championships, 3 as a head coach, 1 as an associate head coach, and 1 as an assistant coach at North Dakota as well, before he made his trip over. Of course, he's a North Dakota alum as well. Nick, we all know the man by obviously the stories that we see on ESPN and the highlights of him now. But, since he came in 2000, what has he really done for this Bulldogs program that, coaches in years past maybe just haven't been able to do?
First of all, he's won them 3 national championships. So he's taken this program, which, wasn't bad, but he's made them into a perennial powerhouse. That's what he's done. And he's made it into a program where here in the upper Midwest, there are a lot of choices to go to, as you know, that are high profile programs. And at the end of it, he's made it a place where players want to go and play. He's developing NHL talent. He's winning national championships, as I mentioned before. And year in and year out, again, this team just always seems to find a way to to have a deep run into the NCAA tournament. So that's really what he's done. He's taken this small city of Duluth that's up there on the North Shore, and he's made it quite the hockey hotbed up there in the Iron Range of Minnesota. So, and honestly, for Scott Sandlin, there were the last couple of off seasons, Noah, we've kind of been watching his name potentially float around to see if he would be making the jump from the NCAAs maybe into the NHL landscape. We haven't seen that happen just yet. So kind of curious how long he sticks with the Bulldogs. Not that I don't think he's leaving anytime soon, but just with the success he's had, is he happy being a college coach? Does he want to make that jump? I guess that's kind of my questions is, what happens with Sandlin here then, the next few years. Again, 20 years behind a program in any walk of life, whether it's pro, collegiate, or even junior level. That's a very long tenured program. It shows you the respect, and it shows you, the trust that this university has in the job that he's done. So he's absolutely earned every single decision that he's allowed to make. But I would be shocked if he doesn't get plucked from the Bulldogs here in the next couple of seasons to bigger and better things.
It's interesting. I actually don't think he's going anywhere. I really don't.
It doesn't feel like it.
And because of this. Also, it's interesting to see a head coach be at a place so long that is not his alma mater. A lot of times that we see, coaches end up there. But, he played for North Dakota. He coached at North Dakota. Before that, he was actually in Fargo in the mid-1990s. So that's another interesting piece as well, too, is that he's kind of like that Midwestern, Minnesota, North Dakota connection. And of course, his kids growing up, his son playing for Mankato. I don't know that maybe he really has a desire to make that jump to the next level unless something, absolutely perfect opens up. Not to say that, he's not going to be able to or wouldn't be able to. I just think that, where his family's at, I think maybe he's kind of set in stone as being the guy at Amsoil and, being in Duluth for a long time, similar to, I guess, maybe like Red Berenson in Michigan, just kind of saying, this is where I'm going to be and this is where I'm going to kind of set up shop. And the other thing that you have to credit him with is it just seems like he surrounds himself with a great coaching staff every year too. Of course, Brett Larson, if you're a Huskies fan, you got to be absolutely stoked that Brett Larson is with us for the next 7 years after spending a lengthy portion of his tutelage underneath a guy like Scott Sandlin and learning the ropes and what he brings to the table. Assistant coach Derek Plant in his 7th season, coming back to the Bulldogs last year after spending 2015 through 2020 with Chicago in the National Hockey League. He put up 92 points in his senior year in 1993. I believe Brett Larson would have been on that team as well. He finished with 219 points in his collegiate career. And in his first coaching season, won with the team in 2011, back in that championship as well. Adam Krause, in his 3rd season behind the bench as an assistant coach, he had 37 points in his Bulldog career from 2011 to 2015. And he won a ring the second time around in 2019 when he started his coaching career. But the interesting one, and usually on when you look at a coaching staff roster, and this isn't discrediting anybody, but when you look at the volunteer assistant or the goalie coach, sometimes they don't really stand out all that much. This one's a little bit different. Brant Nicklin, if you remember the Bulldogs from the late 90s moving into 2000, you should remember that name quite well. He's in his 8th season as a volunteer coach. He's worked with a pair of netminders that went to play in the National Hockey League. And of course, Hunter Shepard, who, as we know, the first goalie in 50 years to backstop his team to back-to-back national championships. The interesting stat line on Nicklin is he played in net from 1996 to 2000 for the Bulldogs, 8 shutouts, 137 appearances, 76 of those were consecutive. Both of those are still team records up in Duluth. And he had just under 4,000 total saves. So you want to talk about a guy that maybe knows his way around the crease. Brant Nicklin is a guy to look forward to there as well. Nick, do you think that when we watched the Bulldogs last year, did it seem like a team that was maybe still getting over the loss of Hunter Shepard, or do you think that it was a little bit more of just turnover and the different season with the pod and just finding their groove again for a team that had success for so long?
It's more about turnover. If you really look at their roster, they're a younger roster. They lost a lot, especially in their back. And remember when they had Scott Perunovich, just to name one name. Yeah, right? Who is that guy? So at the end of it, I think that this team loaded with, a lot of underclassmen. I think it was more just kind of you call it a retooling year for them. Again, I don't think that they're kind of like a North Dakota now. Again, they don't rebuild, they reload. And that's what what Scott Sain and this program have done to kind of create themselves with that amount of skill that just keeps getting fluxed in the lineup every single year. And to me, this team holy cow. If they're going to lose Scott Perunovich, when you can put in Wyatt Kaiser, who really, really impressed me when I saw him in the back end. Again, Scott Sain builds his teams from the back end on forward. And Wyatt Kaiser, who will be a sophomore this year, again, the Ham Lake, Minnesota native, he's a heck of a hockey player in the making. He's one currently, and I think he's going to be quickly rising to being probably the number one defenseman here, I think even as early as next year. So I think they're going to take steps forward next year. And a big reason why, as we mentioned, Noah, we've picked them here as far as I think being number one to finish here in the NCHC.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And the reason, I know we talked about it with Ben Holden a little bit, they do lose those 3 forwards and 1 defenseman. Jackson Cates, a junior going to the Philadelphia Flyers. He had 64 points in his 3 years in Duluth. Cole Koepke, who is a name that a lot of fans should know quite well. He moved on to the Lightning after his junior year, 75 points in 3 years for him. Nick Swaney, Wild fans should hopefully hear more of him. He's with the Iowa Wild right now after his senior season. 101 points in 134 career games. He's had 6 games played in his cup of coffee so far with Iowa and 2 points for him. And then Matt Cairns only had 1 season in Duluth, 6 points for him after moving over from Cornell. 12 career points over 81 games played on the back end for him as well. Adding that 1 transfer in for Duluth, Casey Gilling. In his 5th season from Miami, 77 points, 131 games played for him, 26 goals and 51 assists on a team that saw him end up at minus 29 for his career plus minus. And I know we don't focus on plus minus a ton, but when you talk about Miami, a team that really hasn't had a winning season since I believe 2013, if I'm not mistaken, that says something to have that kind of production as a forward in that group. No offense to Miami, they just haven't had the strength and of teams that they've been looking for. So when you take a look at that, Nick, I've got 3/4 players that are probably going to be impact players for me this year. Getting Kobe Bender back for his 5th season and having a couple more of those senior/5th year players coming back is huge for this Bulldogs team. But the reason I picked Kobe Bender as a forward, his breakout year was last year, 20 points in 28 games played for him, only tallied 13 total points in his previous 57 games played before his 28 games last season. I want to see him be able to replicate that and be that factor. He's coming back for that 5th year. He's going to get another kick at the can. He's got to be the guy. He's got to be the forward that's going to be able to make an impact every single night like he did last year and continue that play and show people that, it's not a one-off and that his game has truly developed to that next level. Getting Noah Cates back as a senior forward, he had 19 points last year, only 5 goals for him, a 9.8 shooting percentage. So for me, I want to see him get a little bit more into that goal column, really kind of find that scoring touch at the next level this upcoming season. And then number 3 for me, the goaltending combo, Zach Stayskal in his sophomore year and Ryan Fanti in his junior year. They combined for a 2.2 goals against average and a 9.13 save percentage combined last year. So I think with those 2 goaltenders, I don't know who's going to be the guy. I think both of them look really good down the stretch. I think maybe Ryan Fanti gets another look. He kind of carried the workload through the bulk of the regular season last year, but nonetheless, 2 capable goaltenders. But I think they're looking for a little bit more consistency. A 9.13, you'd like to see that be a 9.23. I think just getting that extra save for Duluth, that extra, whatever it is from their goaltenders is going to make this team even better and much more dangerous to be able to handle. That was a long rambled impact player answer, Nick. So what do you have for your impact players?
Again, Wyatt Kaiser to me is an impact player. I think if he takes the next step, which I think he will, especially more in the back end, we all know what he can do offensively, his creativity. But if he can be a little bit better boxing out, be a little bit more physical down low. Again, he's not the biggest defenseman in the world. He's only listed at 6'0", 173 pounds, but I still think his skating often sometimes can kind of mask some of those physical deficiencies. I don't know if you would want to use that phrase exactly, but I think Wyatt Kaiser, if he can get a little bit better, a little bit stronger over the summer, he'll be a big one. But another one for me, and he was a guy that was often paired on that top line, was Quinn Olson. Quinn Olson, to me, I think had a year that you saw a little bit of sophomore slump with him. I think if he gets back to freshman form, he's a hell of a skater. Again, he reads plays very, very well, always in the right spot, especially in the offensive zone. He's got a hell of a shot. To me, if he can kind of rebound, to me, he's going to be a very impact player for this Bulldogs team. And then, as you mentioned, one of the guys too that often caught my eye, and I think he's a guy that has this a little bit more of a sandpaper, is Luke Milmock. Luke Milmock, I know that he was in and out of the lineup a little bit, but he almost reminds me a little bit of Micah Miller. 5'11", 183, plays that downhill style. Again, the Wilcox, Saskatchewan native. I think for him, just being true to that identity, really accepting that role. Again, a bottom six player, at least as of right now. But I think
has he scored any big goals, Nick?
I think he scored a big goal. But again, he was a guy that I think he didn't see a shift all third period, and it was very used sparingly in the overtimes in that game that you mentioned. But he's a guy too that I think if he just accepts the role and plays kind of that downhill style consistently, goes in and makes a life hack, especially for opposing defensemen, he can be a little bit more effective. So to me, he's a guy that I think as far as role players are concerned, if he can get back to. I shouldn't say get back, but if he can just be a little bit more consistent in the execution of what he's supposed to be doing on the ice, I think he'll be even more effective than what he was this past season.
Yeah, I believe entering that 5 overtime game that we were talking about, I think it was only 11 regular season games, like you said, kind of in and out of the lineup there. Only about 10 minutes left here in our coverage of the Duluth Bulldogs. We're going to kind of jump over to the returners here. Got 4 players that are coming back for their 5th season in a Bulldog sweater. Kobe Roth, 23 points last year for him, 2 consecutive 20-plus point seasons in a Bulldog sweater the past 2 years. Kobe Bender, like we talked about, his breakout year with 20 points last year. Defenseman Matt Anderson on the back end, great shutdown defenseman, career plus minus of plus 13. He had 7 points last year. And then another name that you hear quite a bit, albeit sometimes in the penalty box, but nonetheless, another guy with that sandpaper finish. That's defenseman Louis Rail, 3 points last year. His career plus minus, Louis Rail, plus 35. You talk about a guy that really does do his job on the back end. Between those 4 players, Nick, Kobe Roth, Kobe Bender, Matt Anderson, and Louis Rail, is there one of those players that Duluth should be extra excited to maybe have back as maybe a guy that really is pegged to be an impact player?
Matt Anderson, 100%.
Okay.
Matt Anderson, to me, is a guy that really secures your defensive core. Louis Rail, as you mentioned, great shutdown defenseman. Matt Anderson, to me, is a little bit more of a two-way defenseman. But honestly, can you really pick one? No, I think both defensemen for Matt and Louis are huge in this because, again, the experience that they bring, again, there's still some young kids on that back end. I think, give another year attached to some of these more senior players, and they're going to take even more steps forward. Again, I talked about Wyatt Kaiser, but if they can get him, if you get him, I think they had him paired with Matt Anderson last year, if I recall correctly. I could be wrong. But again, it just gives Scott Sandlin, again, what his bread and butter is. He wants stability on the back end. He wants to be able to defend well. Then also, more importantly, he loves to transition the puck. That's his big thing. And we see that with Brett Larson's game as well, is that they want that transition game out of their zone efficiently, cleanly, and then get to the offensive part of the game. So to me, both of those guys would be the ones I would be excited about for if I'm Scott Sandlin, having those guys in the back end to really just kind of hanker down that defensive core.
Yeah. As we mentioned, losing 3 forwards and 1 defenseman and bringing that transfer in, 252 combined points that they lost, bringing in 77 back, though, with Casey Gilling, of course, still in the fold there. The freshman class for this group was an interesting one to look at, Nick. 10 potential players that could be coming. Maybe 2 to 4 of them, I think, are going to be there, but they've only got one player that's age 21 moving in here, and that's Devlin McCabe from North Oaks, Minnesota. He had 34 points in 47 games with the Magicians in the NAHL here in Minnesota. When you look at this group, there wasn't really a guy that I looked at was pegged that I said, yep, he's the guy that's going to be, yep, for sure, a forward that's going to be coming in. The unknown, unfortunately, and a guy that was supposed to be coming in earlier last year was William Francis. He's age 20 from St. Paul, Minnesota. He didn't play last year and pretty much a fair portion of the year before. 6'5" shutdown defenseman for Cedar Rapids in the USHL, but he was diagnosed with leukemia in early 2020. And then I think he had a meniscus tear as well. That was a part of that. And really, I don't know the update on his status when he's been on the ice, what's been going on with that. So he was having a couple of really great seasons with Cedar Rapids, drafted by Anaheim. I believe he's a 6th rounder. And he's a guy that, you'd hope that if he's starting to, get back to that point, that he is able to jump in at least and start to get back up to speed. Cause I think he'd look great in a Bulldogs uniform once he's able to transition to that next phase. It's been a very trying time for the young man. So hopefully we wish him all the best. Again, I haven't really heard any update on him. When I look at this class, I would say maybe Jake Hale from Minneapolis, Minnesota. He had 48 points in 115 games in the NHL. He's almost a half a point per game player. For his career, Dominic James, he's only 19 from Plymouth. He had 34 points with Lincoln last year in the USHL. Kyler Clevin from Moorhead on the forward end as well, 25 points in 53 games with Waterloo in the USHL. Those were kind of the guys that I said, you know what, I could see those 4 maybe making the jump. Owen, their guys are young, and I think that's the biggest thing when you talk about you have those returners coming back for a 5th year. Duluth has the ability to wait on some of these guys and let them develop for that extra season. Owen Gallatin, he's only 19 from Hugo, Minnesota, 21 points with Fargo in the USHL last year. He's kind of a maybe guy for me. Brett Oberle's 19 from Woodbury, 30 points over his 2 seasons in the NHL with the Magicians. And then Ben Steeves, Carter Lonnie, and Jack Smith. Jack Smith only 18 from St. Cloud. I don't think those 3 are making the jump just because they're 18, 18, and 19 respectively. Nick, have you gotten a chance to look at the kind of the freshman groups potentially coming in? Is there a guy that, maybe stands out from this list, or do you think that it's really going to be a veteran experience and committee that's going to kind of carry the mail here for Duluth?
Well, there's no question that Scott Stanley relies on his veteran guys. And if there's one thing that I would say that Scott Stanley has done in his entire coaching career is, nobody knew who Scott Perunovich was outside of Minnesota until he played with the Bulldogs. He takes his teams and he gels them very, very well. So the one thing with Stanley, why he's such a hell of a coach over these past, 15, 20 years is that he can take, not the highest end skill, but he can get his team to buy in. He gets his teams, all on the same page. And I think that's the one thing that he does so well. So, and to me, you mentioned that defenseman with leukemia, you mentioned his size. So the one thing that, I suppose I forgot to mention was the last couple of seasons, they were missing guys like Nick Wolf on the back end, 6'4". They missed some of those big, heavy defensemen that could make, the opposing needs forechecks come in and be like, oh, okay, yeah, if I'm going to go get that puck, I'm going to be meeting 6'4" and 225 to 240 pounds of meat at the board. So if he's not able to go, and again, we wish him all the best in his health and his recovery, that's a staple, I would think, of Scott Stanley, is having that bigger defenseman that are really tough to play against, especially in his back end. But again, he's a hell of a coach. To me, there's a lot of those guys you mentioned that are young. I think that will be waiting out a little bit. But again, some of those older players, they'll see him come in, not, the player, but having Casey Gilling, honestly, the transfer, he's going to be that offensive spark that they'll probably be relying on here for next season. But I think, again, with Scott Stanley, he'll find the right mix. He'll get them all on the same page, and they'll be a dangerous hockey team no matter who's in that roster.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see Casey Gilling probably going to slot in that top 6. So I'm curious to see how he adjusts, from being kind of more or less the guy. I mean, it was kind of him and Gordy Green, I would say, when Gordy Green was at Miami, to being the guy that, they're going to rely on him, but he doesn't have to be the guy, if that makes sense, and can kind of jump into that system. Some players, you know what, they flourish when they're in that position of maybe kind of being in a thin roster and having to carry the mail a little bit. And other guys, they find even more success when they're paired with some really good forwards and able to kind of spread out that scoring and kind of like hide in the weeds, if you will, and jump out, and pot a couple of goals and not have to be, fully relied on as the only one or two players in the lineup to be able to score goals. But as we wrap up our coverage here of Duluth, Nick, as always, we want to know here as the Huskies, are going to get Duluth 4 times this season. As I pull up our schedule here, they've got Bemidji starting off their season 2 times in Bemidji, the Icebreaker tournament at Amsoil, the University of Minnesota the weekend after the Huskies have them for a home and home, St. Cloud January 7th and 8th in St. Cloud, and then of course ending the season as always March 4th and 5th in Duluth. Miami, North Dakota, Denver, and Western they have twice this year. Colorado College and Omaha each one season or series, I should say. And then Alaska Fairbanks, Northern Michigan, and a Mankato home and home will kind of round out their schedule. What do the Bulldogs have to do to try to chase their 3rd national championship in four full seasons, I should say? And what do the St. Cloud State Huskies have to do to match up in only 4 matchups instead of 7 or 8 this year against the Bulldogs?
Well, again, we mentioned it before. They have a lot of returners, so they're just going to have to just take that next step as a group. Honestly, the Huskies themselves are going to be looking to do the same thing. They're the national runner-up, but how do we take that next step to be even better? Because again, with Minnesota-Duluth, the one thing that they're probably a little bit more experienced with is playing with that proverbial target on their back. And I think for them, just having a little bit more consistency in their game, in a more regular, season schedule, I think will help them quite a bit. Again, they flourished in the pod last year. And then when they switched over to that, more traditional weekend series type of scheduling, that's where they had, a little bit of all those ups and downs. If they can iron those out, they'll be all right. And again, this Huskies group, this Bulldog group, they know each other well. The coaches know each other well. There's a lot of stuff they do similarly. There's a lot of things that, they know each other so very well with the way they play the game. But if it's for me, when I noticed, watching the series of the last, 3 years, it comes down to who can limit mistakes. It comes down to goaltending performance, and it comes down to who really can, match speed and can get around the physicality. That to me is what drives this series. But more so, and that's where St. Cloud, having a veteran presence coming back again in almost a similar situation to the Bulldogs do. A lot of players coming back is not really a period of acclimation, you want to call it. The Huskies and the Bulldogs, the first time they'll meet is in January. So both teams will be up to speed by then, no question about it. But staying out of the box, I know with Huskies, when they lost this series this past season, they got independently trouble early. The Bulldogs did make them pay. And again, the Bulldogs are a team that's built where when they have a lead, they're kind of like Tampa. They don't really like to give it up. And for the Huskies, same thing in the back. So it's going to be, again, a fun series to watch. It always is. Even more so, the fans will have an opportunity to see it this year. And again, it's always a blast to have these two teams come together that play similar styles of hockey. And it always seems to be 3-2, 2-1, 4-3, always close games. And that's what makes this rivalry very, very special.
Yeah, Duluth, an interesting year last year. In fact, even, you made the point about the pod. I actually thought even, in the pod, they weren't exactly, linear in terms of their success as well, too. I think maybe only St. Cloud, and even St. Cloud had their ups and downs, maybe probably even just North Dakota was the only team that I think came out of the pod that was like, yep, we feel okay with where we're at. And even then, North Dakota, they're definitely going to be, looking to tweak some things as well, too. But when you look at Duluth's game, that they combine speed and skill with that blue collar workman style so well, especially when they're playing at home. And I think when you look at Duluth's success, one of the things that I'd like to see them get back to, if they're able to have any sort of success, they kind of have to find that killer instinct a little bit again. I thought that in their 2 championship years, those were kind of moments when Duluth was able to, once they took control in the third period or enter the third period with a 1-goal lead, they were making things happen, and it was such a difficult time to try to claw your way back into a hockey game. I go back to the UMass game in the Frozen Four. Like you mentioned, it was a group that just looked tired. They didn't have that kind of goal-scoring finish that you're looking for in the clutch moments of a Frozen Four championship qualifying game, but you do have guys that have played a lot of hockey, albeit besides COVID, but have played a lot of hockey in the past couple of years, being in those Frozen Four opportunities. But nonetheless, I think that's where Duluth has to get back to, is just finding that ability to kind of shut the door once they have a team on the ropes. If you're St. Cloud State, it's all about playing to the level of your opponent. Are you able to match the intensity? I think when we watched the Huskies, albeit it turned out quite well for them in terms of an adversity building moment, was when they went up to Amsoil and got absolutely blasted, whatever it was, 5-0 or 5-1.
5-1, yeah.
Yeah, and that's where the Huskies, you can't have that happen. You played them tight all season long. You jump in, whatever it was, 3-0 with your best period of hockey the following weekend, but then you almost let a good Duluth team claw back into the game as well. So consistency and understanding that, like you mentioned, mitigating mistakes, every single shift has to matter against a team like the Duluth Bulldogs if the Huskies are going to be able to compete here. As always, we do wish the Duluth Bulldogs nothing but the best in the NCHC, except for our St. Cloud State Huskies. Nick, do you have anything else to add for Duluth before we move on to our next topic?
I guess, we mentioned Tom Curvers, last week. I'll mention him one more time. That's our thoughts go out to the entire Bulldog family. Tom, I didn't know him personally, but reading the stories, whether it's The Athletic or from different media outlets, just learning the type of person he was. There's well documented the type of player that he was, pretty good offensive defenseman, but it sounds like, for him, it was always just one of the nicest human beings off the ice. And I think, especially in today's world, in today's sports world, that's something that I guess you don't really hear very much, is that, he was a guy that really cared about the people he worked with, was asking about family. And that's just a tough loss, again, for the Bulldogs and, again, the Curvers family. So, again, our thoughts here from the Huskies Warmer House podcast go out to anybody that he was close with. Tom Curvers, again, just sad story. Wonderful human being from what I've read, and sucks to see him go.
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about the NCHC teams, and I know we'd like to give all of them a hard time, that sort of thing, and especially North Dakota, but I would say all the teams, we have an immense amount of respect for in general too. And I think one of the things that I'd like to say, we got to go up to Amsoil Arena, and we've been up to Duluth and seen Duluth fans come in and interact with a lot of them on Twitter. Of course, Bruce Siskey is going to be joining us next week as well. Really, they are nothing but a class act, as far as we can see when we go up to Duluth. And I think their program, what they've done, obviously their facilities are first rate, but so are their people. And I think that's important, not only with the Tom Curvers situation, but just in general, to point out, how great it has been to cover the NCHC and have a team like Duluth in the mix as well. But that will do it for our coverage of the Bulldogs. We're going to jump in for a quick little segment here previewing the St. Cloud State women's hockey team and their upcoming full schedule, which is now released. You won't want to miss it in our Extra Ice session. And welcome into the Extra Ice session. Of course, Noah Grant here, along with Nick Maxon, here to finish off the show. Nick, the St. Cloud State women's hockey team looking to grab a couple more wins this year after grabbing, I believe it was 5 wins in last year's campaign. As they look forward, they have a little more clarity in their viewport, if you will. Can I use the word viewport? What is this, like a Star Trek episode?
Sounds about right. Star Trek or Star Wars or whatever the hell that came from, whatever sixth dimension, but that works. I have a friend who has not seen Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, or the Harry Potter movies like at all, and I question our friendship immensely. So I don't know why that made me think of that, but nonetheless, we look at the women's hockey schedule. They added 6 non-conference games into the docket besides their WCHA action here. You've got Lindenwood on the docket. January 1st and 2nd is going to be that Battle of the Berg in Pittsburgh with Boston University, Penn State, Syracuse, all in the mix there. They've got essentially a matchup with RPI on Thanksgiving for their non-conference schedule as well. And then, of course, St. Thomas enters the fold as far as their league play, both in October and February for this women's hockey team. So, Nick, let's start with October. The Huskies do open at home with Lindenwood Friday, Saturday in the first weekend of October. Wisconsin, that's their first WCHA matchup, followed by St. Thomas, and then Ohio State to round out the month of October. And then moving into Thanksgiving break, Minnesota State, the Gophers, Friday, Saturday after a week off, and then RPI on that Thanksgiving break.
And then I guess if we're going to do the first half of the season, I don't know why I keep rambling on here, but Bemidji State and Minnesota State to finish out the first half of the season. When you look at the first half of the season, Lindenwood, Wisconsin, St. Thomas, Ohio, Mankato, the Gophers, RPI, Bemidji, and then Mankato again. How difficult do you think it's going to be for this St. Cloud State women's team? Their first WCHA test is Wisconsin. I think your reaction said it all. That's a very good group that the Huskies are going to have to get up to speed with. So how important is that Lindenwood series the weekend before going to be to kind of tune them up for that next weekend?
I actually disagree with that 100%. I think the important part is Wisconsin. And the reason why
that's what I said.
No, I mean, so right. Hold on here, Chief.
Okay.
No, what I mean is I don't put really the precedence on Lindenwood. I really don't. I don't think that's important at all because Lindenwood and Wisconsin are two completely different programs and two completely different stratospheres. So let's continue the space rhetoric, shall we? I actually like the fact that they're facing Wisconsin right away. And here's why I say that. It's a wake-up call to them. To me, it's a good measuring stick, and it's something that the team is going to look at the schedule and go, okay, we got to be ready now. So you even before they set the foot for a game that during training camp and the off-season workouts and looking at this schedule and going, man, we've got to be ready. And I think at the end of it, with the coaching staff, Steve McDonald and those behind him, they know that this is a year where they have to see improvement. Absolutely do. And I think with the class they have coming in and some of those underclassmen that are becoming upperclassmen, there's a very good chance that they do so. But I like the fact they're getting a big test early. I really like that. And, you kind of hope that, Wisconsin being such a great squad, you hope you find some success. And even more so, let's just say you don't. You hope you at least build something for what is to come later. I think I like the fact that with Wisconsin early, to me, it's going to be what sets the tone for the rest of the season right away. And so I like it. And I wish the Huskies, that they prep like hell for this one, because again, I think that's going to set their mentality for not only October, but wait till February.
Yeah, as we know, the season is, usually kind of the ebb and flow in the glass case of emotions, if you will. I think you got to have at least one of those games against Lindenwood, get off on the right foot, start the season right. St. Thomas, I think that's where you kind of have to establish yourself, as a team in the WCHA that's been there, done that, and kind of show St. Thomas, what you can do right off the bat early in that October series as well. Ohio State's going to be a tough matchup. November, Minnesota State, I think you've got to have, at least one of those games there. They've got the Gophers the following weekend, RPI and non-conference. The month of December for me, Bemidji State, the 3rd and 4th, and then Minnesota State, Mankato, the 10th and 11th. I think you got to have 3 out of 4 in there. And the Huskies are good enough to take not only 3 out of 4, but all 4 of those in December. That's got to be the mentality, obviously, against every team, but especially those teams that are kind of in that same echelon as you were, right? Your Bemidji States, your Mankato's, St. Thomas is probably going to be in the mix. Throw Duluth in there a little bit. That's where I think if you can grab a couple of games in December, get the ball rolling as you move into January, you move into the Battle of the Berg, as you head out to Pittsburgh, enjoy your time at a little bit of a holiday tournament before school gets back in. That's where I think we talk about not only being able to win as many games as you can, but finding traction at the right points of the season. We go back to the men's hockey season, right? 2 weeks before the end of the regular season, they were rocked up in Duluth. They responded very well. They got the win on home ice. Just great to be able to jump into the NCHC Frozen Faceoff and carry a little bit of momentum into that next game. As we move into their January and February schedule, they've got, like we mentioned, out in Pittsburgh, the Battle of the Berg there. Then they've got Minnesota-Duluth at home, Ohio State at home, Bemidji State up in Bemidji, and Wisconsin to round out the month of January. That's a lot of hockey games in the month of January. February, home and home against St. Thomas, home and home against the Minnesota Golden Gophers, and then rounding off the season, just like the men do, up in Duluth, the 18th and 19th in February. A little bit of an earlier end than the men's season, but nonetheless, Nick, Duluth, Ohio, Bemidji, Wisconsin, St. Thomas, the Gophers, and Duluth again, plus that holiday tournament in January. What do you think of their second half of the schedule? Anything that sticks out to you?
A lot of time at home on January. Again, that's besides the Battle of the Berg, as you mentioned, 6 games at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center, and that the only team on the road up in Bemidji, again, for a couple there. So you have some opportunity there. But again, Wisconsin's going to be tough. Minnesota's going to be tough. You're going to, and as you mentioned, the ebbs and flows of a season are going to be really, really important for the squad. But I think the bigger point you mentioned is that you have to find a way to take St. Thomas. You got to find a way to take Bemidji State. I think teams that you should at least be very, very competitive with, you got to find wins to those, and you got to be able to start pushing those of Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Minnesota State. You really, really do. And I think with that second half of the schedule, with a lot of time at home at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center, take advantage of that home ice advantage, and really try to get some momentum going into the last half of the season. So again, they go nonstop, basically from October all the way through February. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games in January. That's a lot of hockey, and with really seemingly no end in sight. I don't really see Noah anytime between January and February where there's a week off. And so conditioning is going to be important, staying healthy, trying to, making sure you can be on the ice if you have an injury or you're nursing it correctly, because it's going to go quick. It's going to be a lot of hockey. And these are really good teams in the docket. So I really hope that this SCSU women's team can look at this, look and rise to the challenge of it, because it will be a challenging schedule. But if they play their cards right, this could be a very enjoyable season for them, the one that could see them a lot of success.
Yeah, the biggest challenge, I think, for this women's group, you look at the WCHA, there's no secret. You kind of have the big 3/4, if you will. The top 4 teams in WCHA are usually the teams that are, they're having great seasons, and they're kind of, I don't want to say powerhouses, but really have taken that next step in the WCHA that year. Wisconsin's always in the conversation. Minnesota's always in the conversation. Ohio State has, recently had a great squad. And I would say you even throw Minnesota-Duluth in there. Besides Minnesota-Duluth, I mean, the big challenge with this group, and we've talked about it so much, is that consistency, playing, that full 60 minutes, 2 nights over a given weekend, and being able to follow that up. And when you look at that, right, you've got St. Thomas followed by Ohio State, followed by Mankato, followed by Minnesota in October and November. You don't really have, besides, I would say, at the end of the season, Minnesota and Minnesota-Duluth, and in January, Minnesota-Duluth into Ohio State there. You don't really have kind of that 1-2 punch of facing like an Ohio followed by a Wisconsin, or a Minnesota followed by a Minnesota-Duluth, besides those pairings there. And I think that what we've seen from this group is they'll play so well against Minnesota, they'll play so well against Wisconsin, then they come to a team that, maybe it's a little bit lower in the standings, like Bemidji or Mankato, and they split with them, and they don't play with the same identity that they did against those teams that were in the top 4 of the WCHA. There's a lot of fluctuation in the schedule between playing a potential top 4 team and a potential middle of the pack team in this schedule. And I think that's where St. Cloud, if you talk about that growing point, that growing period where they're going to have to take those steps this year, that's where it's got to be. Is, you might play Mankato, you might split both season series with Mankato, but you have to give them the same effort that you're going to give the Golden Gophers, that you're going to give the Badgers this year, and make sure that you're worried moreover about your own game and what you're bringing to the table and consistency every night, instead of the opponent that you're playing, and really elevating your game every night there. So I think that's where that next step is going to be. Is you mentioned they've got a great class of offensive players. They're starting to find that good mixture of team presence to be able to carry the play offensively a little bit more. But it means nothing if, look at the Tampa Bay Lightning. If the compete doesn't match the skill level, and for the Tampa Bay Lightning, the compete matches the skill level right now, the Huskies have to do the same thing if they're going to find any sort of success.
100%. And, as you mentioned, and even we've seen that with Wisconsin on weekend nights, where, they play really well, and then they lose a heartbreaker, say on a Friday, 3-2 or whatnot. But then you look at them the next night, it just is not the same effort. It's a much different ending on the scoreboard. And so you mentioned consistency, but I do feel like a lot of it's going to come from within. I think, as far as the coaching staff, I know they get a lot of brunt and a lot of responsibility to try to rile up the players, to try to make sure they're playing well. But at the end of the day, for the athletes, you have to really look inside and be able to have that short-term memory, right? Especially for these women. And that's including wins, right? A win's a win, but that game is done the minute that final horn sounds after either regulation, overtime, or a shootout. It's done. And you have to be able to look ahead and say, all right, this is a clean slate. We have to, go back to the drawing board and do exactly what we just did. And if anything, we got to work twice as hard because they're coming after us. They're going to make adjustments and all that good jazz. So again, there's some areas of opportunity here for this women's squad. I think we both recognize that, Noah, but can this squad find that extra level? And then more importantly, can we keep it at that level as they go out the regular season? And I think that, again, there's plenty of talent on this roster that's coming in that can do it. But it's going to be up to them to really, put the pedal to the metal and really try to put themselves in a position where they're much better in the WCHA standings versus these last few seasons.
Yeah, certainly helps having a world-class goaltender in the nation. Emma Paluzny back for her 5th season. Of course, Sonia Hola and Carly Reese, 2 capable goaltenders in that mix as well. And then I think having a more consistent season compared to last year might be a little bit more helpful for this group. But like you mentioned, that January jam-packed, what did you say, 10 games?
10 games, yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of hockey, and they're going to have to be ready when they come back, not only from Christmas break, but at the beginning of the season. We're going to be here, of course, to cover it all and figure out what the men's and women's teams are up to as we move into hopefully a normal season at the end of September and into October. Should be exciting. Really excited for the season to get started, and really excited for what we have on the docket coming up this week. We've got Bruce Siski joining us Wednesday night to talk a little bit about Duluth and maybe a little bit of football and a little bit more. So and then after that, Nick, I'm not really sure how the weekend's going to play out. You're on vacation. I'm traveling to Minnesota. We'll keep the listeners up to date on what's going on. Of course, the only 2 things we have left to preview coming up in the next couple of weeks, we've got the non-conference schedule for the men's team that we're going to take a look at, as well as we're going to do an NCHC preview for a little team called the St. Cloud State Huskies and take a look at what they've got going on coming up here for the 2021-22 season. Nick, anything else to add here for episode number 68, or should we go take a nap?
Well, you can go take a nap. I'm not going to work, so
I am too. I wanted to envision that briefly in my mind.
No, but everybody, for those who listen to the Huskies Overdose podcast, one thing I will add is thank you again for joining us and being with all your support. Have a happy and safe 4th of July weekend, whether it's at home, whether it's up at your cabins, wherever you may be. Enjoy it, relax. The weather is going to be hot. But I wouldn't have it any other way, Noah. I wish you and your family as well. I'm being weirdly sentimentally nice to you. I know this is different for me. I'm trying to check my blood pressure right now. So please have a good time with your family. Enjoy it. Kick back and relax, and and again, enjoy the holiday.
Yeah, you as well. Safe travels. Of course, you got your vacation the week after. Safe travels for that as well. Make sure you keep all your fingers. Don't blow them off in a fireworks accident. We like to make sure that you're, finger full. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Jason Pierre-Paul is not my idol, so that's okay.
Goodness gracious. All right. That will do that will do it for episode number 68. As Nick said, we appreciate you joining us. We wish you the best 4th of July holiday. I know Nick and I are excited to spend some time with our families. You should as well, while you're listening to the Huskies Warming House podcast here in this episode here coming out probably on Saturday. If you're listening to this, I think we're going to get this out today, but if it's Sunday and you're getting this episode for the first time, I'm sorry I lied to you, but really I don't actually care. Nonetheless, episode 68, we'll see you back for, I believe, episode 69 whenever we will, but episode 68's Healthy Scratch interview segment, if I can spit all my words out here, Nick. Bruce Siski will come out Thursday morning, so look for that one as I travel to St. Cloud State to meet up with Mr. Maxon at the Herbrooks National Hockey Center that same day as well. Keep your head up, kid. Anyway, see you next week in the Den.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.